Hello and welcome back to Pace Law Firm. We're joined again by immigration expert Andy Semichuk. Andy, you've mentioned the area of cross-border couples in previous interviews. Let's deal with Canadian immigration. Assuming you have a client living in the United States or even elsewhere who has married a Canadian citizen and wants to immigrate there, how does the process start?
Okay, so usually they contact us by telephone or email, and I get back in contact with the relevant client. We discuss what they need, and if it turns out it is a spousal sponsorship with the foreign spouse coming into Canada, then I send them an intake form. We sign up an agreement, of course, where they retain me, but I then send them an intake form and a checklist of documents that they're going to need to provide us. The intake form asks some basic questions like name, address, phone number, etc. And the checklist of documents includes things like passport, marriage certificate, birth certificates, things of that nature.
Okay, what happens once you cover the intake form and checklist?
All right, well then we prepare a package of forms for the clients, and we then send the client the forms either by email or fax for the client to go through the forms to make sure that we've got everything right and that there are no corrections that need to be made. If there are corrections, we correct the master copy, and we then compile a master complete package, which includes the forms and all the documents that we've collected. And I go through that entire package, checking off everything, making sure it's exactly right. Only when I am confident that it's exactly right, I send it over to the client for them to go through it then and correct everything, make sure everything is exactly the way they like it. And only when they're 100% confident do we actually submit the package to immigration.
And what happens after the package is submitted?
Well, it goes first to the processing center in Mississauga for Canada. And there they check over the sponsor's data and make sure that the sponsor is eligible to sponsor the spouse from overseas. There they check into things like bankruptcy, whether the man is in jail, for example, or things of that nature, whether they're on social assistance, or whether they're able to sponsor the relevant applicant from outside. Once they check the sponsor, the package is then approved and it goes to the consulate, in the case of the United States, to the Buffalo Consulate, which is the central processing unit for the United States. And then it may be forwarded on to a regional consulate, like, for example, Los Angeles, where the consulate considers the foreign applicant's aspect of the case to make sure that the foreign applicant is eligible.
What does the Canadian consulate do?
Well, they review the package, make sure that the individual in the United States is married, obviously, to the person in Canada, has not been previously married and not yet divorced, for example. Make sure that they don't have a criminal record, things of this nature. And once they check out, basically do due diligence on the foreign spouse, if the foreign spouse checks off okay, then they arrange an interview with the foreign spouse.
Okay, and what happens at the interview?
At the interview, the consular officer wants to find out whether this is a legitimate marriage. In other words, was it a marriage of love, or what we regard as a traditional marriage, or was it a marriage of convenience for immigration purposes? Their key concern is that it not be a marriage arranged in order to make that foreign spouse eligible to come and immigrate to Canada. So we have to convince the consular official that indeed it's a real marriage by providing the details of how the parties met, how they got together, the details of the ceremony involved, how they're living together, things of that nature. And once we get the consular official to see that it is a legitimate marriage, then he will process the papers.
So is this kind of like the movie Green Card, where they ask you what's your husband's favorite toothpaste and stuff like that?
Yeah, they will ask. For example, they can ask, what's your spouse's parents' name? Where was he born? What kind of movies does he like? What kind of supper does he like to eat? Things of this nature, or vice versa for the woman, in order to just catch them off guard. And if the answers don't match up, if they don't, if they're not in sync, if too many answers are out or off the mark, then they deny the application and the couple can't bring the foreign spouse into Canada.
Is this whole process something I can do without using a lawyer?
Well, like anything, I suppose you could. For example, you could fly a 747 by taking out a manual, getting into the cockpit of the airplane in the pilot's chair, pulling out page 1, and start reading and pushing the buttons and so on. You could try it, but it's complicated. A lot of people get into difficulty doing their own applications. It truly is complicated. And like, for example, people who do their own income taxes, if it's a simple matter, sometimes it's something they can do. But in most cases, I would say with spousal sponsorships, because it's so important, they really do need an immigration lawyer to help them out.
One last question. This whole thing sounds expensive. How much will it cost?
Well, what is expensive is if you screw it up and the spouse is blocked from coming to Canada. What do you do then? I mean, you have to go through appeals and it can get very expensive. And because it's such an important matter, I mean, after all, you're sponsoring your spouse to come to live with you for the rest of your life, and it really means the beginning of your lives together. You want to do it right. And so relatively speaking, it's a good investment. But add to that this is a very competitive field, and we have to be competitive with all the other immigration lawyers around the world who are doing this thing. And we're very affordable. In the end, it's something that I suggest is a good investment.
Okay, thanks, Andy. We'll see you next time. For more information on immigration, please visit pacelawfirm.com.